everybody, DeathsStalker here. So if you watched my video about last weekend's race in Aragon, you know that a lot of people were crashing in wet conditions, or what they like to sometimes call mixed conditions, when it's not quite wet, not quite dry. And for a racer, that is probably the hardest skill to pick up. When I was racing back in my day, you know, we had three types of tires. We had slicks for the dry, intermediates for when it couldn't make up its mind if it was wet or dry, and we had rain tires when it was fully wet. In MotoGP nowadays, they only have rain tires and slicks. The intermediates have been discarded because the rain tires nowadays are way better than the tires I used, and the slicks, of course, they have options for slicks that are actually much better as well. Now, when we're talking mixed conditions, it's where the track is wet, but it's not raining, or it's just a very little drizzle here and there. And as a racer, that is so hard to make the decision, what do you want to call for tires? You can run full wet tires, or, you know, soft slicks. They have the options now of two types of slick tires, a soft and a medium usually. So the soft slicks will give you lots of grip, but generally don't last as long. Also, the soft slicks tend to require a steady rain for them to function properly. Now, the medium slicks sometimes are what you would use when it's looks like the track's going to dry a little bit, and you might have to drive on a dry track on a wet tire. And the medium slick would actually, or medium rain tire actually would be a little more durable. Not necessarily, but maybe. Now, what happened in Le Mans, it was sort of like a double hit. Not only were you dealing with the you know, the mixed conditions where it's not really dry, not really wet, but you're dealing with cold temperatures, which sort of makes it even harder to pick your tire, because yes, the medium tire would definitely last longer, but you also have to get the tire warm, and if the temperature is cold, you can't warm that tire up. So it's very challenging for the racers. When you're on a track in situations like that, you know, a lot of times you can spot the wet line, you know, the damp patches of the track, because the asphalt's a slightly different color. But again, that depends on the age and the condition of the track. I have been on tracks where you couldn't tell the wet patches because either the track was brand new, or the track was so old and worn, you couldn't tell the wet spots from the asphalt patches. Either way, it sucks. Now, the MotoGP tracks happen to be a little bit better, but again, they're traveling at a higher speed. Like, I race 250, so they're traveling at a much higher speed than I ever was, and a lot of these tracks have blind corners. So if you crest the hill, you go over to the other side of the hill, you don't really know what's there until you get there. And you can see what happens if you remember that Moto2 race where Happy Siren got hurt because a guy had crashed and he crested the hill and couldn't avoid the crashed motorcycle. Now, certain type of racers, you know, like Marc Marquez is one, thrives in mixed conditions. The race at Le Mans, he probably, if he was healthy and fit, probably wouldn't have had a problem, and more than likely would have probably won the race. But he's like 1 in a billion. The majority of racers are usually either really good in the dry and good in the mixed conditions, but very seldom do you get someone who's like really good in all. For some reason, I don't understand. I was good in rain. I never figured out why, but I was always at the front, near the front, or at the front, when it was heavily, when the track was very slippery and rainy. But the guys would, in a lot of the tracks, would smoke me in the drive conditions. Even though I kept getting faster, they just kept getting faster too. The other problem with the mixed conditions is a lot of times, like especially this weekend, they had a high wind crossing the track that, besides bringing in the wet weather, was cooling the track and the bikes. So your tires actually could cool off so much that they were below their operating temperature. The tires they make nowadays, they actually have a temperature range, which I find fascinating because we never had that when I was racing. We never even had tire warmers back then. But they actually have the effective range of the tires where they work between, you know, 15 to 40 degrees Celsius. Then after that you have to switch up to the next level. So that might be the soft, and the medium is like, you know, 25 to 50 or 60 degrees. And it's interesting to see that sort of stuff. The bikes actually have temperature sensors that actually monitor the tire temperature. So if you're actually overheating the tire, you'll get a red light on your dash telling you to sort of take it easy, because if you overheat the tire, it becomes very greasy, and in some cases the tire can start losing its rubber. So you really want to you know, drive within the spec of the tire. That's why the racing nowadays is far much more of a science than it was when I was doing it. And I give the guys a lot of credit, because it's a lot of information you have to remember nowadays. Now, the truth be told, you ask any rider, they will want it either to be wet or dry, not in between, because that makes the tire choice and everything really easy. But unfortunately, you don't necessarily get that, so you have to make do with whatever you get. The other problem you get with you know, the mixed conditions is that when you set your suspension up in the dry, you want a very firm suspension, because you want to be able to get all the traction you can get out of the front and rear tires. But in the wet, that firm suspension will cause those softer wet tires to actually lose grip, and in some cases actually wear out prematurely. So in the wet, you want to have a softer suspension settings. And in a mixed condition where it's not quite really wet and not really dry, you're going to want a hybrid suspension setup, because if you try to ride with, you know, one or the other, you might end up wearing out the tires you're having to pick. So you can sort of see how this can actually be really complicated, and in a lot of cases you can see the stress in the pit crew, you can see the stress in the rider when they're going out in these sort of conditions. And of course the other thing is, when you see someone like, you know, Mark Marquez, who doesn't really care, he'll ride whatever conditions they are and do well. You see him just sort of going like, yep, we're going riding, which is not good for people who really hate these conditions. So anyways, I hope that gives you a little understanding. I'm out here freezing right now, so I'm heading back in, and hope you enjoyed it. DeathsStalker signing off.